今の遊戯王はプレイングよりもプレイング鍛えた方がいい。お互いセオリーを抑えてたら結局のところ行き着く先はまあ運を引き寄せる力ってのがね、こう必要なゲームだなってのはつくづく思いますね。Welcome to Midnight Master Duel。ということで皆様、心と体とあそこの方はお元気でございましょうか。まあご覧の通り、いろんな方がいろんなことを心の底から赤裸々に吐き出していらっしゃる今日この頃でありますが、そんないわゆる現代遊戯王について個人的に声を大にして申し上げたいこと、私めもたくさんあります。本日はそれらをちょいとまとめてまいりましたので、言葉を選ばずね、包み隠さず語りつつ、そんな現代遊戯王のあれこれを語っていますと必ずと言っていいほど話題に上がってくる増殖する水というカードがありますので、それについても少しばかり触れようと思うのですが、私英語版のマスターデュエルやら、多言語カードやら、海外のね遊戯王のことをいろんな形で、ご紹介している身ですので、今回は英語で、語ろうと思います。一つよろしくお願いいたします。何かしら参考になった、共感できたと思っていただけたら幸いでございます。So for me personally, growing up in the late 90s and early 2000s, the dawn era of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where it was simply impossible to find any other boy around you who does not own any single card or play any single deck. Sticking around and streaming MD, Master Duel, as well as collecting some of the recent cards printed, it's like a lingering effect of those days way back then. And therefore, my opinions and feelings may very well be slightly biased for having to compare how the game itself started off in the beginning and how the game has become, although I do try to understand and encompass both lovers and haters of modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, casual and competitive players, what they have to say and why. The first statement I would like to make is, basically, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not anymore the game to play to win, especially MD that is BO1 with no side deck or a mulligan. It's just way too much luck involved and it's pretty extreme. I mean, other card games like MTG, especially Legacy and Vintage, I use decks like Reanimate or Dreadnought myself. They can be a hell of a motherfucking extreme sports, but the quality of the extremeness of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is quite unique, I would say. I don't know how exactly to put into words, but if you lose coin flips 10 times in a row, or even 15 times in a row, which can happen and has happened to me and to other guys I've watched, you just can't expect to win the games that you deserve to win, or move up to higher ranks that you deserve to move up to, based on the level of your understandings of the game and skills as a player. Now, if you still want to try, I would say there are two ways to approach to the situation. One is, make your mind immune to all the bullshit because the bullshit's not gonna go away. With no hand traps or ways to respond, don't ever hesitate to scoop early so that you get to focus on playing as many games as possible. So it's pretty much, hit or miss kind of gamble. Now, is it really fun? Some people may find it completely absurd, others may still find enough meaningfulness. The other approach is, try your best even if you didn't get to go first. But then the big chances are you're gonna have to wait a long ass minutes until it's finally your draw phase so you can make a logical, realistic judgment on if the opponent's board is breakable or not. You're gonna also have to deal with a huge amount of frustration and discouragement if it was not breakable in the end and you lost the game. And very often, it's not at all because you executed something wrong, there was a hole in your game plan, or some choices of cards were not solid enough when building your deck. In Japan, the shit is sometimes called power harassment, but anyway, it really makes you think and feel which parts and how much you're willing to tolerate and accept. Unless you have no clue what the opponent's cards do and how they work together, you might have to be flexibly multitasking while the motherfucker's taking forever setting up his board on turn 1. Like brush your teeth, clean your room, watch or read something else, stretch your stiff ass and do some exercise, and so on.
Which is why purely can be pretty annoying.
By the nature of this game, I get that, you have to be crazy to a degree, but just to save time and your sanity. Speaking of knowing and remembering cards, Of course, it's better to take time and energy to go over all the card texts every time a new set comes out, but there are so many cards that even some famous players have never seen before, and they can very well lose to them, just for the fact that they are too unfamiliar with the brand new shit thrown at them. Rules are very complex and full of contradictions in this game, and some of them still to this day make sense to nobody. One good thing about MD is that the system will take care of the rulings and resolving effects automatically. However, you still need to deal with the card texts that are often very long, and the time limit doesn't allow players to read the text of each unknown card and process all the information. So even when highly controversial new archetypes came out, like Fiendsmith on OCG or TCG, and people come up with a bunch of articles, tutorials, and episodes of actual games featuring them, I'm like, it's way too much information, because again, texts are like ancient scripture, and the rules and resolving effects are pain in the ass to the point where even some Yugitubers make mistakes, misread, or forget some crucial parts of them. But once they become available on MD, for sure I'll run into those motherfuckers on a regular basis, because the whole new toy syndrome thing that many guys out there continue to suffer from. They're gonna kick my clueless ass for a little while, and that for me is the best and most efficient way to learn by examples of how they work, what works against them and what doesn't work, so eventually I'll be able to beat them with the existing decks and cards of mine. So yes, changes are the nature of everything, and something so rapidly evolving like Yu-Gi-Oh may not be a game for someone like me, basically, who would rather stick with a small portion of what I'm familiar with and nothing more than slightly updating a few cards of my decks to somehow match the latest environment, if I care to win as many games as possible, but not at all willing to constantly catch up and deal with that, come and go of many of the new cards, no matter how powerful they are, largely affected by the frequent updates of the ban lists, which is another thing. I've still made my own version of Voiceless and Tenpai and tested them on Diamond and Master ranks several times, as I felt that I couldn't figure out enough of how they work and how to face them just by letting them beat the shit out of me. And that was possible because I was able to find my interest in at least some parts of the art and flavor of some of the key cards, which I strongly believe is very important for all players, rather especially for hardcore competitive guys, but more on this particular topic later on, because I'm kind of jumping around a little bit now. Back to the luck talk. I don't know much about overseas, but in Japan, I've heard quite a few tournament-oriented guys often go on, you can always go back to your ever-adorable pet deck, but if you're so tired of losing, why don't you pause at least for a moment and go for one of the meta, because they are meta for many reasons. They also say, certain things you can learn only by handling the best deck in the format yourself, including how exactly to beat it with a rogue deck, which I do not completely disagree. Now, this one guy who stands out way above everybody else regarding DP on every fucking Duelist Cup and double CS qualifier event. You may recognize him as the leader of Japan's national team who competed in most recent semifinals. As he says, essence of this game is 70% luck, 20% deck building, and 10% skills. What is said very often about some other card games surviving strong today, going second itself is a wrong-ass move, is much more obvious in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! The deeper you get into it, the more you feel that essentially all the decks are the same, because if you get to do what you want to do uninterrupted or before your opponent has a chance to do so, then you win. If you don't, then you lose. And this can happen literally at any level. And it's not just about the result of coin flip. If you think this way, to start the game, each player draws only 5 randomly out of 40 or more cards, where no same cards are allowed more than 3 copies. Of course, shit happens sometimes. Otherwise, it's gonna be like, shogi or chess, so it's a gift and curse at the same time, as it means a player who is less skilled or experienced still stands a chance against someone world champ class like him. Especially in current times, ratio between starter/main engines and other staples can be quite tricky, which would also bring the discussion of hand traps or board breakers. I cannot really speak for OCG or TCG, but on MD, you probably want to reduce the chance of having to wait for many minutes going second to the very minimum. So some amount of hand traps are definitely required. At the same time, or maybe I should say by the same amount of chances, imagine just one card like a floodgate stunning you completely and you don't even have an option to force a grind game to wait until you draw something that can get rid of that particular bitch. Some players give up that kind of flexibility for more of what they call consistency and don't even bother looking at cards like Lightning Storm, Evenly Matched. Just not the kind of game I want to play personally. Also, breaking the board the opponent so carefully crafted is definitely a fun part of the game, so my preference is at least a few board breakers first. This is also because I like old cards such as Duster and Super Poly, and then as many hand traps as the space in the deck allows. Hopefully enough numbers so that opening hand includes at least one or two of them, along with starters in order to strike a decent balance. But either way, once in a while you will run into shit like, you actually get to go first, but your opening hand is full of motherfucking hand traps and nothing else. Or only starters with no extenders or backups like, Cold Buy or Triple Tactics. So if you get hit by one Ash, Veiler, or Imperm, you have no choice but to pass the turn, and the motherfucker's gonna simply kill you on his turn. It's just how it is, and it all depends on the opponent's deck and the opening hand of each player. Look, Yu-Gi-Oh! Itself has been around for more than 25 years. There are so many types of decks and cards, and each one of them is good against certain things but completely useless against others. In regards to that, I admit that what I said earlier, all the decks are essentially the same, is a very generalized statement. In the microanalysis scope, yes, there are some differences, and it's important to study those differences for those who trying to do well at the high level. But they have to realize that even at some highest levels, guys are so heavily affected in so many ways by coin flips and opening hands, emotion-wise, gameplay-wise, and a game can go such extremely one-sided to the point that it's painful to watch even as a third person. Although every once in a while you may get to witness something great, like Maguro's miraculous comeback against Quanto on semifinal. But again, the point here is, theoretically, nowadays there are so many decks that are technically Exodia, by which I mean uninterrupted equals win. So does it really matter that much, as the motherfuckers say, which deck or which cards you choose to play, unless they're obviously out of date and not meeting the current power standard? Where can people find diversity and the room for individual choices? Ultimately, the answer is whether you like a card intuitively enough to run it in your deck. What it does during the actual game can also be a reason for liking or disliking it, but I'm talking more about something like artwork, flavor, name of the card, just your pure responses in general to how it looks and how it feels. If you really cannot enjoy any of these aspects and give them all up for the pure sake of winning and consistency, then why the fuck are you even playing a card game? Even if you're a highly competitive player, you gotta like something about each of the cards in your deck besides how they work together to help you win, right? Otherwise it's too stressful because the game itself is already stressful to a large degree. And this, I believe, is also a big part of the whole, Maxx debate. Most of the time it just gets overshadowed by feedbacks on its position and influence within the gameplay. But yeah, we can start with the gameplay aspects of Maxx. For me, I don't like to be used or use it myself, so I just choose not to add it to any of my decks, period. I didn't watch the whole TCG part of WCS in Seattle in September, but just because it went how it went doesn't mean that the Maxx is so-called necessary evil as many guys are murmuring about. It is a balance breaker for sure, if not necessary evil. No activation condition or need to adjust the number of cards at the end of the turn like Mulcharmies, and without getting hit for lethal damage or mill the entire deck. If you draw 5 cards, 6 cards, of course you're gonna win the fucking game. Well, in reality, you can still lose, but for sure there are no other cards like that, so too many people get too dependent on it. I know some good players are saying that it's not something you can restrict casually. I do get their point of view and the reasons behind it, but again, as a matter of luck, chances of drawing any cards in your deck can never be 100%, so many games can actually go and end without a single Maxx involved. And the deck with 0 Maxx can beat the shit out of the best player that I mentioned earlier. I've seen that happening on hit streaming on YouTube. Can't remember exactly, but I guess it was on Master Rank. And most of the time, it's not something that you want to actively search for unless your deck has a clever way to make use of its attribute, level, type, attack or defense without spending too much resources. I've never seen anyone adding it to the hand with Small World, which is obviously under the high risk of getting ashed, called by, or gamma, although it can be a bridge to search something else, but overall, I would just say, just spam the shit and let the motherfuckers deal with it. There's so many other options or other cards you can choose from. Hand traps or non-hand traps that are efficient enough to help you win. It'll be a lot healthier, as people surely hate getting thrown Maxx at their asses on their draw phase. For those who argue that it's for talent, cash, or Phantom of Yugioh, how would you explain a bunch of brainless guys who used to do that shit even before any of those cards became available on MD? It does create an unpleasant atmosphere more than anything else. That's one of the main reasons I love using Metabeat. I don't have to do anything while a guy just reveals and gives up one card in hand before my first main phase. Even Apple is like a cute little girl, a vanilla monster with no more than 24 attack, soon to be punished. Yeah. I'm not saying all these because I hate cockroaches. In fact, I don't despise them as passionately as many people do, but just look at the picture. I mean, no offense to the artist or whoever came up with the whole idea, but what you see here is nothing but some stupid shit glowing in the darkness of fucking oblivion in between the goddamn furniture. There's no character or anything really interesting going on flavor-wise, and the naming of the card is kinda corny and childish too, so yeah, I just can't find anything appealing about this card. I don't think I can conclude my reasons for insisting or refusing to use Maxx on MD any better. What am I gonna do once Fualos is implemented? I don't know. I don't even know if I'll be still doing more than just daily missions on MD when that time comes around. The last few months, I've been very much reminded that the more you take it seriously, the more depressing it gets, as this game itself involves so much luck and randomness beyond logic and math. It's just that my partner kind of pushed me to take it a little more seriously and see what happens. So that's what I did from like August to the end of November-ish. Watched and listened to some of the best players in the world, learned as much as I could, and experimented, applying everything all together to see how far I can go on Duelist Cup and the monthly ranked. On the second stage of DC, I played 100 games in 3 days, and I almost missed the bronze icon. Sometimes it was like, lost 3 long grinding games in a row, each of them took more or less than 15 to 20 minutes, lost a bunch of DP, and right after that, 4 easy wins within 10 minutes. I was like, man, this shit makes no sense. Sometimes I used a Metabeat and run into some other Metabeats, which felt like classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Double evenly match against Voiceless and the opponent scooping immediately, just to list a few of the fun memories. A lot of motherfuckers say this and that about evenly, but it was super effective against Fire King Snake Eye and Yubel also, but I lost 4 games against them. 4 particular games just because of my stupid ass mistakes, which I remember as if it was last week. Without them, I would have finished the event with higher DP than Mr. Maguro the Dancer, who was bringing in the same Fire King Snake Eye he was using on Double CS semifinal, but struggling as infernal hell, playing approximately 40 hours total, including multiple 12-hour streamings on YouTube on his channel. Each of the 3 days, I played quite long hours as well, but not that much. So apparently, he wasn't able to strike the quality over quantity. Again, by the nature of MD, shit can happen. Now he is cooking with the motherfucking Tenpai, which is good for him, but even after Tenpai is implemented, although I have been, benefiting from it to some degree, my general feedbacks toward Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And MD are pretty much the same. Yes, climbing up to Master definitely feels easier with shit like Metabeat because the probability of going first is so much higher, or even with other decks like Not Sun Avalon Rika, but pure Rika, which is my go-to. Just if I customize a little bit, like, adding Solomon Judgment or adjusting the strategy or game plan, like if I can manage an extra body or two as materials depending on my opening hand, trying to close the end board with Cactus Bouncer or Naturia Rose Whip. However, as a result of motherfucking power creep up to before Tenpai Emergence, needing to, sort of attempting to balance everything this way feels like a sign of further chaos in the near future more than anything else. And I'm recording this before the questionable ban list update on December 6th, so we never know. The time might come again where it's strictly better to go first or something a lot worse. So many people are already mentioning this, but the nature of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is fundamentally different from other card games involving cost or mana at basic levels. So along with the result of evolution in order to survive and thrive as a content for this long without being too boring or too conservative, many things might have been inevitable to happen. If, however, commercial needs are taking over everything among the insiders, as some people assume, like, Mofoku's gonna complain anyway no matter what decision we make. Something like, it's difficult to ban cards like Tearlament's Kitokaos, mainly because they need to keep geeky, introverted guys happy. Guys like who can't hold a decent communication or interaction with women, or people in general, in real life. In fact, those are the type of motherfuckers who are sponsoring big time as well. If something like that is true, I feel it's pretty fucked up and very toxic in the long run. I consider myself as neither a lover nor hater of modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Particularly. Well, you can definitely call me a Maxx hater. There are parts of it that I do enjoy, but there's so much stress, hollowness, and other negatives. That's just my very honest feedback. And it's important to be very honest, as it is a game after all, although I wouldn't denounce it as a childish game. Hell, especially modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't a game for little kids anymore for many reasons. So am I gonna continue to pay attention to all the madness of dynamic updates on MD and Yu-Gi-Oh? Am I ever again gonna put the same amount of dedication and commitment as the last few months? Not sure, but I will probably continue to do streaming on Monday nights, at least until I finish up my own small project of introducing foreign language cards. Last but not least, I would like to take a moment to thank my girl for supporting me and cheering me. Thanks to you, I was able to learn a lot in the last few months. はい、ということで、思えばね、9月天杯実装前にですね、マスター5昇格直前ダイヤ1で使ってたのは今やもはや、センチュリオンの介護官と言われて久しい、双剣センチュリオンはおろか転移すら入ってないトラップトリック型とでも言えばいいんでしょうかね。当然 G も入ってません。あとはどのデッキが何%みたいな細かいデータは一切取ってないんですけども、日記みたいな感じで一応記録として残してあるのは10月末にマスター4から3にあと一歩で届きそうだったテンパイをですね、構築はそのまんまで月明けて初日2時間回して1勝9敗その直後ですね、気晴らしに今しがた申し上げた双剣を使ってみたらなんと、1時間もしないうちに10勝5敗ですよ。でもって、その2週間後のある日に6時間ぐらいね、やったら、その時は双剣じゃなくて別のデッキ複数使ってたんですけども、一気にダイヤ2から5まで落ちたっていうね。もうね、事故り方がひどいんですよ。もう初手全く動けないけども1枚1枚はね 100% デッキの必須カードだから、じゃあ事故率高いから抜くかってわけにもいかないですし、そんな場合もね結構あって、だからね本当にもう使いたいデッキと使いたいカードを使うのが一番ですよ、やっぱりね。その上で勝てたら嬉しいし、負けても楽しいからあんま気にしねえっていうのが特にMD との正しい付き合い方向き合い方だとつくづく思います。勝率とかを最優先にするのは今の遊戯王のねゲーム性 MD のシステム、デザインの方向性とかからしてあまりにも非現実的かつ虚しいっていうふうに強く感じますね。でその今に至るまでどんなことがあったかというと、一つ言えることはですよ、現在禁止を免れて暴れ散らかしているカードの何枚かは2017年から2020年までのエクストラデッキから出てくる子たちはねエクストラモンスターゾーンかあるいはリンクマーカーの向いてる先にしか出せませんよっていう前提でデザインされてて、でそれらが禁止されてないからね、なんだかんだでみんなやってるからとはいえ今のルールにおいて本当に適切なのかって話ですよ。そもそも2017年と2020年のルール改定自体も含めてね、 プレイヤーだけじゃなくて遊戯王を商品として取り扱う立場の方々もみんなそういうのにね振り回されてきたわけじゃないですか。それでも何かしらの要素を十分楽しめてる人たちがなるべく勝つためのいろんな理論を確立して、できる限りのことはやって、でそのうちの何人かはねクリエイターとしても、今なお一線で活躍してるんだと思います。どの要素をどれだけ楽しめるか、好きでいられるか、また我慢できるか、受け入れられるかっていう、その度合いっていうのはね人それぞれなわけですから、続けることを選ぶのであればね文句ばっか言うだけじゃなくて、少なからずいいところを自分で見つけるっていう作業を意識的にやる必要も、出てくるとは思いますけど、例えばねランクマッチでランク上がって1戦目、先行取れたけどアホみたいな大事故でろくな妨害しけなくてそのまんまテンパイに焼き殺された。2戦目先行だったら誘発も貫通できる80点90点の手札だけどコイントス勝てなくてうららとか泡1枚もなくて粛清に粛清番長された。3戦目またまた高校で赤き竜からコズミックブレイザー出てきてファランクスとかも乗り越えてなんとか粘ったけど最終的には手数足りなくて結局無理だった。そんなの繰り返しで一気にね2ランクとか3ランクも下がったりしたらマジでくっそつまんねえなこのゲームって誰だってなりません？皆さんどうかわかんないですけど私には結構起きますね、そういうことが。というか起きましたね、ここ数ヶ月だけ見ても。むしろ私なんかよりもっと理不尽な目に遭われてる方々もいらっしゃるでしょう。そんなおかしなことがしょっちゅう起きうるゲームをですね、勝つことを主な目的にして真剣にやる価値があるのか、そこはすごく疑問に思います。デュエリストカップのセカンドステージでもこの日のこの時間帯で一気に1万いくら溶かしただのなんだのよく言われるようにね、どれほどの名人がどんなデッキを使ってても各自で設定した目標を達成するのに 3,4 時間でいける場合もあればね、半日とか1日かかっても終わんない場合もある。そういうものなんだということは常に認識しておくべきじゃないかなと。で、みんながみんなその時間を避けるわけでもないってのは言うまでもないですけど、現にマスター1ぐらいだったらね、なんだかわけのわからん完全にメタ外のオリジナルデッキで何度もね達成してる方いらっしゃるじゃないですか。あるいはね、それこそうぞうむぞうの食材を混ぜ合わせて作り上げる唯一無二の一品料理というかね、マジでどうやったらこんなん思いつくねんって言いたくなるような超変態的なコンボデッキをね披露して、遊戯王ってこんな楽しみ方もあるんだぜみたいなね、ちょっと哲学的な言い方にはなってしまいますけども、彼らのようなね楽しみ方楽しませ方を編み出せる人たちこそ本当の意味でのプロじゃないのかなと。プロといえばですね、海外でも8月以来ですね All Pro Players are Quitting みたいなのが大きな議題の一つになってますが、いわゆる遊戯王オワコン、あと競技勢についてですね、本当に言葉を選ばず言いますよ。数字で表される影響力的にもね、界隈を引っ張る立場のお兄ちゃんたちの中に性格終わってる野郎どもが多すぎるし、舐めた発言があまりにも多すぎて、でそういうのが作り出す空気感ってのもまたね、遊戯王っていうコンテンツ自体を非常に薄っぺらいものにしているような気がしてならないんですよね。エンターテインメントの一環っていうのもありますから、生意気な態度とか全体的に病んでる雰囲気とかともかく、そもそも言ってることが結構矛盾だらけっていうのもありますしね。これについてはね、また別の動画で改めて取り扱う必要があるかなって感じですけども、おそらく今回以上に総じてネガティブな内容になりますし、どちらかというとね、ちょっと他に優先したいこともありますからね。こんなギリギリ昭和生まれのね1階のカジュアル YP の独り言でも、もしご要望があればまたねこんな感じでちょこっと話をまとめ上げて動画にしてもいいかななんて考えております。あとね、重ね重ね、相方にはこんな私の背中を押してくれてありがとうと改めて言いたいです。今回の動画の内容についても皆さんの思うところね、ぜひともコメント等で聞かせてくださいなということで、長々とお付き合いいただきありがとうございました。ご視聴ありがとうございました。明日もお元気で。